first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
The world has failed, I tell you. The world has failed yet again.
Hi, everybody. I am joined by Gordon Dimmack, journalist and campaigner, and I am also joined by Chris Williamson, ex-Labour Party MP and now a member of the Workers' Party, and a fellow traveller of George Galloway, who's competing in the Rochdale by-election. Chris, Gordon, thank you so much for making yourself available. Now, before I give you a chance to speak, I must remember bit.ly/CryptoRich3Speak, bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey, and also bit.ly/CryptoRichRumble, even though it's not up there. Censorship-resistant platforms, please support my work there. Okay. Hey, Chris, thank you so much for making yourself available for the second, and I hope second of many, many times to come. We're going to be talking about what the Workers' Party are up for and what you're doing. And then, Gordon, thank you, because this is going to go out in your channels and on my channels, and we're going to be, what are we going to do? We're going to be grilling Chris and running him over the coals or something like that. Is that right? Gordon, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and let people know where they can find you? Gordon, do you want to say where people can find you?
Oh, sorry. So I think it says Chris. Yeah, my name's Gordon Dimmack, independent journalist. You can find me at gordondimmack.com. All of my work is collated there over several platforms, so that's the best place to go.
And I shall link to that in the description below. And Chris,
hi.
Where can people find you?
Well, I'm on social media, Derby Chris W. That's at Derby Chris W. On Twitter. I've also got a couple of Facebook pages as well, so that's probably the best place to look me up.
Great, and I shall link to Derby Chris W in the description below. And you're also a member of the Workers' Party, and I'll link to them in the description below. Do you want to say a little bit about the Workers' Party, how they're distinct from the other smaller parties?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, I joined the Workers' Party last year. After the 2019 election, I was involved in establishing a new movement called Resist, and there was a real move within the organisation to create a political party. We did look at potentially creating our own political party. We also looked at the possibility of merging with the Socialist Labour Party that was established by Arthur Scargill in the mid-1990s. And eventually that didn't work out, unfortunately, but we eventually decided that we would join forces with the Workers' Party. So we've kind of moved over en masse, as it were. We'd always worked very closely with the Workers' Party. We'd always been very supportive of George Galloway's stance on issues, particularly his stance on foreign policy, and obviously his socialist credentials were something that we certainly supported. We've been very much in favour of common sense socialism, and the Workers' Party's programme is very much about common sense socialism, really about essentially making the economy work for ordinary people, and also being committed to peace and disarmament around the world rather than war and arms sales. Indeed, the first point of the 10-point programme of the Workers' Party is to bring an end to imperialist wars and the withdrawal from the NATO, which we believe is a warmongering entity that really should have been wound up when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. I mean, it was allegedly established in the first instance to stem any possible threat, which was never really a threat in any event. But anyway, that was the propaganda that was put out, a threat from the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union no longer existed, so why did NATO continue in existence? Well, we know why it continued, obviously, to continue generating funds for the military-industrial complex. Excuse me, that's my phone going off. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the Workers' Party is a good fit for us in terms of the agenda that we were promoting, and we're very happy to be working now as part of the Workers' Party, and we're involved in this by-election campaign in Rochdale as we speak, and we're hopeful that George Galloway, who's our candidate there, will do well. I mean,
yes.
We think he's on course to win it potentially, but we're not taking anything for granted, obviously.
All right, we'll come to that in a second. So let me get this right. So you don't think, instead of sending $12 billion to Ukraine to kill people in Ukraine, and the British bombing Yemen and supporting the slaughter of the people in Palestine, You're opposed to that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, indeed. I know it's really odd, isn't it? Yeah. But look, I mean, I think this is a view which is shared by the overwhelming majority of the British public, actually. And indeed, the overwhelming majority of world opinion. The truth is that the political class are completely out of touch with reality. And, they serve the interests of the corporate capitalism. They serve the interests of the military-industrial complex. And they seem to be enthralled to Tel Aviv. The Israel lobby wields far too much influence in British politics. I mean, nearly half the members of the Parliamentary Labour Party are members of the so-called Labour Friends of Israel, and it's an even bigger number for the Conservative Party equivalent. And they pulled off a coup in Parliament this week when they were able to basically browbeat the Speaker into breaking with convention, breaking with the rules, indeed, of the House of Commons, in an Opposition Day debate that the SNP had put down a motion, and the SNP, I think, only have about 3 Opposition Day debates in any given year. This is where the opposition party has the ability to determine what the agenda will be for the day and put forward a motion for discussion and to be voted upon. The Labour Party has something like 17 or 18 as the main opposition party. And they've never put anything forward in relation to Gaza in terms of a ceasefire. But the SNP, the first opportunity, they put that down. And the Labour Party were able to persuade the Speaker, although I think they're pushing it an open door because he himself is a pro-Zionist. His father, indeed, was involved in actually founding the so-called Labour Friends of Israel back in the 1950s. But this break with convention meant that the Labour were able to amend the SNP's motion. This is unprecedented, and that would have meant then that that amendment would be voted on first, and consequently there wouldn't be an opportunity to actually vote on the SNP's proposition. Now, what the SNP were putting forward was a motion which I think could have been strengthened still further, but it did actually talk about the collective punishment that Israel is meting out to the Palestinian people, and that was unconscionable to the likes of Sir Keir Starmer, who is on record as saying he supports Zionism without qualification. So that reference to collective punishment was removed. There was talk about releasing, the hostages, and that is something whereby there was no reference to the Palestinian hostages, of which there are thousands. I mean, thousands of people are held on what's known as administrative detention in Israeli dungeons. So they were very keen to talk about that. They were very keen to condemn the Palestinian resistance, to condemn Hamas, but no criticism of Israel at all. Talking about, in the Labour amendment, calling on the Palestinians to lay down their arms. No reference to the Israelis laying down their arms. I mean, they are the aggressors here. Let's remember, they are an occupying power, and they have no rights to so-called self-defense. But in international law, the Palestinians have an absolute right to resistance, including armed resistance. This is laid down in international law. So it's Israel which is transgressing international law. It's transgressing all norms of decency, engaged in a genocide, as we know, which is happening before our very eyes. And you've got the political class in this country falling over themselves to make excuses for them, to protect them diplomatically, and to support them actively with arms sales, but also, we believe, potentially troops on the ground. And they've certainly providing military intelligence. I mean, this has been admitted to. I mean, and the reason why I think that there's probably special forces on the ground is that the government's issued a D notice on the media to stifle reportage of this. So, this government is completely implicated, complicit, as is the opposition as well. And I saw an interview with that appalling Islamophobe Douglas Murray.
Sorry, Chris, hold on a second. Chris, hold on a second. People who, the American viewers, what a D notice is when the government tells the media you can't talk about this subject, but it also means that that those media outlets can't say that they've got a D notice preventing them talking about this subject.
They can. That's wrong, Rich. They can. They can totally disregard a D notice if they wish to. There is nothing in law to say that they have to go along with the D notice. In fact, they have ignored D notices in the past. They don't have to go along with it. They don't. They just fall in line, as Chomsky says, in a way that dictatorships just look on in awe.
Right. Okay.
That's an important point. The problem is that the political class and the legacy media is also complicit in the situation in Gaza at the moment. And of course, it's not just Gaza. Let's remember, some of the appalling violence which the Israeli authorities are visiting on the people in the occupied West Bank. I mean, this is quite shocking. You know, many people have lost their lives there. I mean, the people are being brutalised on a regular basis. I saw a terrible video footage of the day of a young Palestinian man who'd been blindfolded and told to run towards a group of other Palestinians, and then he was just shot in the back. I mean, you know, it's just like some sort of horror film, but this is happening in reality. But I've just got to say, just before you intervened in regards to the issue about the D notice, about the interview between Douglas Murray and Benjamin Netanyahu, where Benjamin Netanyahu said, "This isn't just our war; this is your war." You're referring to Britain and the United States. And yeah, I mean, yes, he's absolutely right. I mean, for all the reasons I've just outlined in terms of the military hardware and support, the military intelligence that they're providing, and we think potentially troops on the ground, special forces on the ground in Gaza.
Wow. Okay.
Chris, let me ask you, if you don't mind.
Sure,
Can I ask a question? I've been on many a march, as you have, in London and elsewhere in other cities up and down the country over the last 4 months with the Palestinian side, and they've been shouting over and over ceasefire now. They've been demanding over and over ceasefire now. They wouldn't even have a vote in the House of Commons up until the SNP tabled this motion. I'd like to know why it took them so long to table this motion, by the way, but still, we finally get a vote. The Palestinian supporters finally get a vote in the House of Commons, so they think, on the ceasefire. So we can finally see, right, who really is pro-genocide here. We're talking about a genocide that is done in our name and with our money. And the overwhelming majority of us, even with the pro-state propaganda brainwashing the whole country, the overwhelming majority, not just of the country, but the world over, are demanding this ceasefire. And the UK government now, the establishment, is, you can clearly see, actively stopping even a vote in Parliament happening on this. Now, I just want to tell people the timeline here. Lindsay Hoyle originally said that he would allow this Labour amendment because it was an outdated political process. Then, after the backlash, the day later, they start coming out and saying, oh, they're scared for MPs' safety. And then we hear from Keir Starmer that before his meeting with Lindsay Hoyle, where Lindsay Hoyle changed this, because Keir Starmer had a meeting with him that made it, Keir Starmer has admitted that he spoke to the Israeli president or prime minister, whatever his name is, Herzog. I mean, listen, there's conspiracy theories here, but this is just a jigsaw that's a perfect picture, isn't it? Of Israel dictating the vote, even the vote in our parliament. I mean, sure, they're going to whip their MPs to vote no on this ceasefire. So, because, as you say, they're all in the pocket of these people, the Labour friends of Israel, the Conservative friends of Israel. I think they're the largest donors as a whole to, that Israel's the largest donors to them both. But you can clearly see here, this is a foreign state that is running our country. We don't have a choice. We don't have anybody to turn to. So I would just want your because I'm furious about this, Chris. I'm furious. I was livid the other day. I had to re-record a video because I was shaking so much. They won't even allow a vote. They are being dictated to by a foreign state, an apartheid state, doing a genocide in our name and our money, and they will not listen to us. Why are they doing this? Why are they going along with this? Are they being threatened? Are they being blackmailed here? I mean, I'm not talking just with, compromise that they might have on MPs, but, maybe sexual or financial, but also are they being blackmailed with, if you don't do this, we're going to blow up the world? Because Israel does have something called the Samson Directive. And the governments of the UK and US are going along with this, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. History is not going to look at these people in a kind manner, is it, Chris? So I just wanted your thoughts on that. Are you as livid as me and so many other people in this country are at the fact that our country right now is being run by an apartheid state?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a shocking state of affairs, and they're also responsible for bringing down the best hope of electing a government that would have brought in a system that would have promoted peace and supported the Palestinian people. That was unconscionable, obviously, to them. A government that would have, I'm talking about the Jeremy Corbyn-led government, a government that would have, introduced common sense socialist policies on the domestic scene as well, and all that was destroyed as a result of the efforts of the Israel lobby. I know a lot of people say that Labour lost the election in 2019 because of the commitment to a second referendum on Brexit, and that certainly did cause most of the damage. But Jeremy Corbyn's political capital had been utterly destroyed by the attacks that he was subjected to, and his response to them. I mean, regrettably, Jeremy sought to try to, placate and appease these bad faith actors. And I mean, and I made this point to Jeremy and the so-called Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs that, every concession, every apology just strengthens the beast, just feeds the beast and makes it bigger and stronger. They'll keep coming back until such time as they totally destroyed the project. And I did refer on numerous occasions as well to the Pastor Nehemiah poem, the one where he talks about first they came for the communists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist, and then they came for the socialists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist, and then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew, and then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. And, essentially that's where we've ended up with a situation where Jeremy's Praetorian Guard were being thrown under the bus systematically. Concessions were made left, right, and centre, and that emboldened the Zionist lobby. And they drove home that advantage. Jeremy's political stock was I think so low that he wasn't able to resist the calls for a second referendum, and they knew that would play very badly in many working class communities who'd overwhelmingly voted to leave the European Union because the European Union hadn't really served their interests at all. And then, we saw what the consequence of that was. And then we've ended up now with, Sir Keir Starmer lying his way into the leadership of the Labour Party, and it's just gone from bad to worse. And, this whole weaponisation of anti-Semitism has extended well beyond the Labour Party now into academia, into the arts world, and so on. And we did get a good victory, having said that, of course, when Professor David Miller won his employment tribunal and is now established in law that opposition to Zionism is a protected characteristic. And that will, I think, be very beneficial indeed, because, David wasn't the only person that lost his job because of his support for the Palestinian people and criticism of the Israeli genocidal regime. Many, many other people have, and many others who haven't been have been threatened, and many others have felt intimidated into silence. So there's a sort of self-censorship going on. So hopefully that will embolden people now. And like you say, people are turning out in their tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to show solidarity with the Palestinian people, despite the best endeavours of the establishment of the political class to demonise them, to suggest that, in some ways, that somehow these are hate marches. This is absolute. Well, it's an insult to these people who are basically decent people who want to see peace prevail and want to see a ceasefire. But look, a ceasefire is not enough. We need to demand much, much more than that, because if we just impose and secure a ceasefire, all that will happen is that the apartheid system will continue unabated. And what we need to be doing is completely isolating Israel. That's what we need to be demanding. We need to be demanding an end to arms sales to Israel. We need to be demanding a trade blockade. We need to be demanding the exporting bodies and other international bodies in the civilized world remove Israel from participation. I mean, they're going to be having another entry in the Eurovision Song Contest. Why a country that isn't even in Europe is actually participating in the Eurovision Song Contest is a moot point anyway. But a country that's engaged, that isn't in Europe, that's engaged in genocide, where they should be given the privilege to participate. And when we saw the apartheid regime in South Africa, they were isolated. There was an economic boycott. There was a sporting boycott. They were completely isolated. They were a pariah. And we know from people like the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu and people like Ronnie Caswell, the former head of the ANC's military wing, and many other ANC activists, African National Congress activists, veterans. They've said that the apartheid system in Israel is considerably worse than anything they ever encountered. And yet they're being supported by the political class and being supported, by and large, by the corporate media as well. It's an absolute disgrace. And we have to continue to raise our voice as ordinary people. And indeed, I'm speaking at a rally in Derby today. And so it's not just in London where these rallies are taking place. They're happening all over the country, in almost every town and the city. People have been absolutely appalled by what they are seeing. This is just another example of settler colonialism in action and what the consequences are. And let's remember, the United States of America was a settler colonial entity, as was Australia. And this is precisely what they did to the Native Americans the United States and to the Aboriginal people in Australia. They were virtually wiped out, and they're trying to do the same. And they're quite open about it. Some of these senior figures in the Israeli regime. There was a think tank that actually published a report. A think tank which is linked to the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu. Towards the back end of last year, saying that this was an opportunity now to completely evacuate the Gaza Strip and to colonize it with settlers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Chris, just one second, Gordon, just on the protest, you won't have seen, I doubt you'll have seen this. When this video goes out, there's a 37-second clip, which I'll play, which is about, and I'm going to say this is not being endorsed by the Workers' Party, right? But about legal protest by paying your tax in the form of a trust. Because, Chris, you may not know, but the International Criminal Court Act and the Terrorism Act of 2000 and 2001 make it a criminal offense to give funds to for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide, and also acts of terrorism. And those acts specify what those are. And genocide is specified as the killing of two or more people that are united by race, nationality, religion, or what was the other one? Ethnicity. So that would include the support for Ukraine and Israel and the assaults on Yemen. And that we can, by paying my tax, I am giving funding to an organization that's committing acts of genocide. And the British government and its agencies and its agents are not exempt from the provisions of that tax, of those acts. So if people want to find out more, bit.ly/makewarhistory. And then, this is not legal advice or anything. People at their, you take your own risk. It's not endorsed by the Workers' Party. But tax protest is a peaceful, legal way of letting the government know, not in our name. So I just wanted to put that in.
No, indeed. I mean, that's a good campaign. Of course, we could get into the discussion about how public spending is funded, and it's not actually funded by taxes, but still,
they just take the money. They just print the money.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and obviously they just create the money out of thin air. I mean, taxes are used for other purposes to control inflation and to manage demand for particular things, drive behaviour change, create a value for the currency, create space indeed when the economy is working at full capacity, where then the government might be competing with the private sector for resources, and that would then drive up prices, create inflationary pressure. We can tax out that demand from the private sector in order to provision the ability for the government to spend on public priorities, as it were. But we're nowhere near at that level of capacity yet. We've got about 9. I think I was looking at the Office of National Statistics figures just a few weeks back, actually. And I think the number of people who are economically or deemed economically inactive in this country are 9 million. So there's plenty of spare capacity there in terms of unemployed or underemployed labour in the country. There's plenty of things that need doing. I mean, our infrastructure is falling to pieces. The public services are in meltdown.
These governments aren't doing it. They're not doing it. They're out to destroy small business. They're out to impoverish. All of that, right? So then we got to do what we can.
They're happy to find the money when it's like Tony Benn said. If we can find the money to kill people, we can find the money to help people. There's never a problem when they want to fight wars. Yes. And if you think back to the COVID situation when there were the lockdowns and so on, the money that was provided, much of it wasted, of course, and went into the pockets of their friends. What's it called? The tracing.
The pharmaceutical industrial complex.
And the pharmaceuticals, of course, yeah, absolutely. But also the money that was provided, for people to have their wages paid whilst they weren't in work. So that money was found, and there was no problem in finding it. And then they claim that there's going to be a reckoning, that people have to pay that, but that's not true. I mean, it just isn't true. But unfortunately, they continue to pull the wool over people's eyes. And,
yes.
I think it's important that we actually alert people to the fact that, literally money is no object really for the government. Anything that's for sale in pound sterling can be paid for by the government. But it's just about political will. And so long as you don't overspend and you don't create an inflationary pressure, you manage it in the way in which I've talked about, you match spending to the availability of real resources in the economy, then you're not going to cause a problem.
No, they're not doing that. The Tory government's not doing that, and the Labour government, if they come in next, which is very likely, are not going to do that. And all the policies that they're implementing are the same policies of the WEF to drive us into poverty, to make us dependent upon the state, and then bring about the central CBDCs, central central bank digital currencies with the digital ID and a biometric wallet, and then we are enslaved because they can debank us, they can stop us from moving about, they can select what we get to spend money on. What's the Workers' Party position on that?
Well, it's a very dangerous step, I think, the CBDC proposition. And, we need to be resisting that, I think, and to, maintain the access to, real hard currency, as it were, because like you're absolutely right to say that, if we get to a point where that is brought in, then any inconvenient individual or group can be closed down at the drop of a hat. It places enormous power in the hands of the elites in society, and I mean, we have to do everything we can to prevent that from happening.
Yes, thank you, Gordon. Anything you want to ask?
Yeah, a couple of questions I wanted to ask you, Chris. First of all, the Workers' Party, I wanted to ask what sort of ballot coverage they're going to have at the election later this year. I want to know what sort of, whether there's a campaign to get people standing everywhere, if possible, because people need another way. It's clear to see here that there is no political party represented in Westminster at the moment, which is representing the people. I say at the moment because I hear your friend Mr. Galloway is favourite now to win Rochdale, which brings me on to my next question. And that's, what do you think of the fallout from this debacle in the House of Commons and, them losing the narrative with regards to the propaganda war and them losing the war of information, because obviously all the truth is on the Palestinian side. What do you think of them now coming out? You've got Liz Truss over in America, doing a speech to 50 people in the audience at CPAC. It's so cringe. Go and watch it on Twitter. It's awful. She's doing interviews where she's saying that Islamists are running Britain and Islamists are in control of Britain. And you got Lee Anderson saying that Islamists are running Sadiq Khan now and Islamists are running the country. They're obviously trying to stoke this racial tension and dog whistling to their shaved heads buddies drinking Stella and whatever that go down and ruin the Stella Centre. What do you think to that, and what is the antidote to that? How do we make people aware that this isn't anything to do with Islam? It's got nothing to do with Judaism, really. Actually, what these people are marching for, and it's quite plain to see, is an end to the suffering and an end to this violent occupation and an end to our support of, quite frankly, an apartheid state and genocide. What do you think to the way that they've darvoed this? The way that they deny, no, it's not us doing, it's the Islamists doing. So they've gone the attack and they've reversed the victim and the offender. So no, we're the ones who are being. What do you say to the way that they are trying to stoke up the Islamic tension? And will you have full bank access?
Well, it's truly despicable tactics, isn't it? I mean, the worst kind of politics, actually, playing to the lowest common denominator, the politics of fear like that. But I don't think it's actually cutting through as much as they would like it to do for the reasons we've already outlined, and indeed you yourself have made the point that tens of thousands, millions indeed people have been turning out to show their support and solidarity with the Palestinian people and their horror and disgust at what is going on. And so it's just another example, I think, of how the political class are out of touch with the ordinary people in this country. And in terms of ballot access, we're still quite a small entity at the moment. Excuse me, we're looking to potentially have up to 50 candidates in the election. But what we're also doing is saying that we need to collaborate with other groups that are trying to build an alternative to the Labour Party, or indeed to the political duopoly, to give people a genuine choice. Democracy's been stolen, hasn't it, really? There is no real choice. Many might argue that, it always has been, really. We've never had proper choice. But look, I think the Labour Party, I was a member for 44 years, did have a strong current of socialism within it. There was certainly a strong contingent that campaigned against war and peace, etc. Campaigned for peace and against war. But these people have all been kicked out of the Labour Party now, or if they've not been kicked out or suspended, they're just having to keep their head down in order to maintain their membership. I don't know why, frankly, people are doing that. What's the point of being in a political party if what you're going to do is keep your head down and not actually speak up for what you believe in? And if the party, the direction it's taking is totally at odds with your values, why are you still supporting them? So, we think it's important that we field as many candidates as we can, that we support these other groups. There's quite a lot of independent campaigns being established. There's a campaign and a very, very experienced and capable candidate who's now going to stand against Sir Keir Starmer in the form of Andrew Feinstein, a former African National Congress member of Parliament under Nelson Mandela, very articulate and very strong campaigner, lives in that constituency. I think, he could give Starmer a run for his money. We're seeing in places like Newham, they had the Newham independents, great results in the local elections. Hopefully that will translate into the general election as well. In Ilford, against a West Streeting, a young Palestinian woman who lives in the constituency, has been selected there to contest that seat. So I think there's a real chance that we will certainly be able to damage the Labour Party. Seats that they might expect to win, they won't win. And I think in some cases we will be able to actually make a breakthrough. And I think if George does win on Thursday, that will be an enormous fillip and boost for everybody that's campaigning, all these independents and other groups, and indeed the Workers' Party itself, of course. It'd be a tremendous boost for us and encourage people to redouble their efforts and also demonstrate that it is possible, actually, for a new party, an independent grouping, to actually make that breakthrough. And look, in Derby, I've spoken to many people there, just as one example, determined to teach Labour a lesson. That's being replicated all over the country. I've never known this level of resentment and disenchantment with the political class, with the Labour Party in particular. Obviously people were angry and disenchanted after the Iraq War. And many people did seek to punish the Labour Party, and the Labour Party did lose support as a consequence of that, lose seats as well. We lost the council in Derby on the back of that, even though we were, I think, the first, if not one of the first, if not the first, to actually make our position in opposition to the Iraq War known with a motion at council. So we kind of nailed our colours very firmly to the anti-war mast, as it were. But we were still punished because we were still flying the Labour flag. But I've never known anything like this. There is genuine resentment and almost hatred, really, of what the Labour Party stands for. That said, however, the Labour Party is still riding high in the opinion polls, but I don't think that's because there's any, great love for the Labour Party. It's more the fact that people are so fed up with the Conservatives. It's a kind of this notion that somehow maybe it's the least worst option. But if we can demonstrate to people, you don't have to support the least worst option. You don't have to go with the lesser of two evils, which, by the way, is still evil, of course. There is an alternative. We're hoping that George can demonstrate that alternative can win on Thursday. And, we're hopeful that, we can get, a lot more people into the Houses of Parliament. And, to have people like George Galloway, who's probably the world's best orator, actually. Not everybody can live with George in that sense, but if we can get people with that same mindset, speaking up for peace, speaking up for decency, speaking up for social justice, for human rights, for a fair deal for working class people in this country, then I think that will embolden still further other people to get involved. And over time, I think there is a real chance. Maybe not at this election, although I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything is possible, I suppose. But certainly after the subsequent one. Then I think there is a real chance then for a new grouping to make that breakthrough, because the likelihood is that Labour will win, and maybe some people will naively be expecting and hoping that there will be some difference, there will be some change. There will be no change. There will be no meaningful change on the domestic front, and on the international front, it could be even worse.
Well, I think it'll be worse on both, in the domestic front. And
you're right.
This Tory government are not implementing Tory policies at all. It's like Thatcher would be turning in her grave. They're putting in place statist policies, but what they do have is a liberty-loving rump of MPs like Andrew Bridgen, who believe in things like old-fashioned notions like the Nuremberg Code and bodily autonomy, things like that, and values like family and faith and culture, right?
Although he's been kicked out, don't forget, he's no longer a Tory MP. But
because of his opposition to the vaccine mandates and how many people have been hurt. He's been speaking up for that. And the ONS have just recently changed how they calculate deaths from the injections, because it all correlates from the injection rollout, to scrub it so they don't, because they're complicit. And he's speaking out in favour of that. You've got this liberty-loving rump in the Tory party that are anti the WF policies. Labour doesn't have that. I looked at the number. I think there were something like 100 MPs that voted against the vaccine mandates, and there were only 8 Labour MPs that voted against the vaccine mandates. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. You don't get to say what I put in my body.
No,
The
absolutely.
state doesn't own my body. So,
Well, Rich,
Labour
can I ask
will
then,
have
if
even
that's the
more
case,
WEF. Sorry, Gordon.
so if that's the case, and so the Islamists did this, right? The Islamists injected it because they've been running the country, apparently, according to Suella Braverman.
Well, if it was
I
the
find it
Islamists,
hilarious.
they wouldn't be promoting paedophilia and the mutilation of children, that they get to choose their gender when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old.
But the Islamists are running the country, they say. I find it hilarious that the people who have been running the country for the last 15 years are now saying Islamists are running the country. It's like, so when did you all convert to Islam? Suella, where's your prayer mat? Where do you go and pray in the House of Commons?
Rishi Sunak, renowned Muslim. And his Muslim wife.
It's obscene, really, isn't it? You know, that they are indulging in this sort of dog whistle politics. It really is, and you know, it may have worked in the past. It may work still with some people today, but I don't think it's got the traction that it used to have. And that's partly because of platforms like yours and others, and social media in general. Where and this is why people are, you know, seeing the reality of what's happening in Gaza now. I mean, if it was down to the legacy media, we'd hardly know any of this, would we? And indeed, I think the fact that, you know, the scale of the protest, which to a large extent has been driven by people getting this information from the internet, from social media, that's driven, you know, the outrage. That's driven people onto the street. That in turn, I think, has forced the corporate media to go further than they would probably have done. Because if you think back to other conflicts, you know, there wasn't the scrutiny. I know it's nowhere near enough, but there wasn't the scrutiny in the corporate media that there is today. It's still nowhere near where it should be, of course. I mean, you know, they're not Al Jazeera by any stretch of the imagination, and I'd love to give a shout out to them because their reportage has been absolutely outstanding on what's been happening in Gaza and indeed, for that matter, in the West Bank. So, you know, that's a real success story in one level, that, you know, social media, the independent media sector, people like yours and Gordon's platforms, has helped to inform people, give people an alternative narrative, an alternative source of information. And that in turn, as I say, has driven people onto the street. That in turn has actually forced the legacy media to actually, as I say, give more attention than they would otherwise have done. And, you know, they can't put that genie back in the bottle, but much as they are doing their best to do so. And we know with things like shadow bans and all the rest of it. But even with that, you know, people, because so many people are seeing this, so people are just organically sharing this information. So they might be able to close down, you know, people here and there. But the information is still getting out.
Yes, it is. Chris, I'm conscious of the time because you want to go to this demonstration. It's Saturday, the 24th of February. We're recording this. Any last words you want to say before we finish up?
Well, I would just say keep hope alive to everybody, and you know, don't give up. I mean, it seems, you know, it's very dark times at the moment. You know, economically and, you know, geopolitically, but the level of awareness that is now very apparent, I think, as to the reality of the situation, I don't think has ever been higher. There's still more we need to do in that regard, you know. But worldwide opinion, and indeed opinion in this country, is very much, I think, you know, in favour of an alternative narrative. And if we can galvanise that, and everybody that's kind of watching this can help in that process. If we can galvanise those people, then I think we can you know, bring about change. I mean, I like, you know, this phrase, you know, when you stand together, anything is possible. And that's what the ruling elites rely on, the kind of whole divide and rule strategy, and keeping people ignorant, because that's how the status quo prevails. But look, a better world is possible. You know, a good society is possible.
Absolutely.
You know, we can do it, but we've just got to have the you know, the tenacity and the courage and the commitment to, you know, to fight back. And I always used to say to people when I used to be campaigning, knocking on doors, that the ruling elites have got power because they've got lots of money, but we've got power as ordinary people when we stand together in solidarity. And our power is far greater than their power if we can actually stand together in solidarity. And that's where where the ruling elites have always succeeded in dividing us. And we need to, you know, come together. And I always say, look, let's focus where we agree. Let's focus on the things that we agree on and have fraternal disagreements where we don't. And particularly those on the left of the political spectrum. We agree on 90% of stuff, really, but we end up falling out on ridiculous stuff to do with identity politics. It's absolutely bloody ridiculous. And that's, of course, being fomented by these ruling elites. And that's why you have the disgusting spectacle of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, these amoral arms manufacturers, actually joining pride marches with their banners, proudly showcasing their banners.
BAE Systems had a front last year.
All these people, it's absolutely despicable, outrageous. But somehow they are seen as progressive.
Well,
how the hell are they progressive?
I think that's a tell. That's a tell that the movements in my opinion, movements like the Black Lives Matter and transgender, and by the way, I don't know if you know, but I joined the anti-apartheid movement when I was 18, right? But I wasn't impressed with Black Lives Matter. They were getting corporate backing, that the transgender movement is getting corporate backing. No, that's not a grassroots movement. And who's backing them are the partners of the WEF and those that are owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. And they're the ones implementing the policies that Labour are espousing, that the Tories are espousing, that the Lib Dems will give us, that SNP will give us. So what there is for us to do is to support decentralised structures, support parties like Workers' Party and others like that are for liberty, that are for grassroots activism, and that are for restoring and returning power to ordinary people. Gordon, anything you want to say before we finish up?
I just want to say thanks to Chris for all his hard work, and I'll see you very soon, mate.
Thanks, mate, and thank you too for your hard work as well. And just a final word for me: if anybody's interested in the Workers' Party, if you just Google Workers' Party 10-point plan, it's there on the internet. And you'll see our 10-point policy program. Obviously, there'll be a more detailed manifesto going beyond that, but that kind of gives you the broad principles that the Workers' Party is based upon.
Fabulous, fabulous, Chris. Thank you so much. Have a great demo.
No worries. Best of luck. All the best.
We look forward to having you on again. All the best. Bye bye.
Thanks. Cheers, guys. Bye. Bye. Bye.